Introducing Minor Wisdom Quintet.
1, 2, a skidda-didda-doo.
Minor Wisdom.
So this week on the podcast is my attempt to branch outside of Texas and do that with Greg Graham. And Greg is a product of Texas. He's a product of Fort Bend ISD, a product of Dulles High School, graduated there in the 90s. So he isn't exactly necessarily the best representation of a non-Texas guest, but he's been out of Texas for many years now. He also graduated from Sam Houston State, Eat 'em Up Cats, and has been very successful on Broadway as a dance captain, a choreographer, a swing. He'll tell some stories about that in this interview. There is a section of the interview that I kind of chime in because his Wi-Fi dropped out, so I talk about that, and it's a good 30-second portion, which kind of sucked because he was telling a really good story, but I don't know what proper protocol is necessarily. Do I stop him and say, let's take that back, rewind that? But he's doing me a favor by coming on here in a time when performing is not necessarily the hotbed of the market right now. So he's doing me a huge favor, and I really appreciated Greg coming on. I could have talked to him for hours, but again, people don't listen to podcasts that are hours and hours long unless it's about like murder mysteries and stuff, because those are pretty. Maybe I should be doing that kind of stuff. But murder mystery theater podcast, that's even more niche than what I'm already putting out there, so I don't think I'm going to try that. Anyway, I hope everybody enjoyed their July 4th. As of this recording, I have not watched Hamilton on Disney Plus, nor have I ever seen the show. So I know nothing about it other than I do know the music. I've heard the music. How do you, as a high school theater teacher, there's really no possible way not to hear the music, but I have heard the music. So I know what the show's about. Also, I posted on Facebook, no spoilers, and then it turned into a joke. Thanks, everybody. You act like all I ever do is joke around. Anyway, so it is something that I haven't watched yet. We're debating if we're going to let our oldest watch it. She's almost 8, and I've seen on Facebook some people post that their children are indeed watching Hamilton. And I know this is the PG-13 version, but I really don't even like my kids saying crap or damn. So, well, we'll see. We may watch it with her. We may not, but eventually we'll watch it, and I'll report back maybe. Hope everybody, again, is enjoying their holiday. It's a unique holiday weekend because some of you are not in the mood to celebrate our country, but that's okay, and I don't blame you. So that's that. Professional development is starting for some people in like their districts. I hope everybody's district is figuring out what they are going to be doing next year, and at least in the fall, if not the spring as well. I know there are already plans of doing some shows online and producing that content for people live. As long as it's not an adaptation or copyright protected, then I think you're okay. But I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not that smart, so don't trust me. Anyway, enough about me. Let's get to Mr. Greg Graham. Look him up online. He's got some great stories on here about some shows that he's done. But, you know, if you want to see all the credits this guy has to his name, please look him up. And the great thing, like Greg Graham, the name Greg Graham, kind of probably not very unique, I'm assuming. No offense, Greg. So if you look up Greg Graham, his name is still towards the top, if not the top. So that's got to tell you something, right? When you're in the Google world, if you look up a name that's kind of generic and you're number 1, number 2. So that's pretty cool. So enjoy Greg Graham's interview. Give me some feedback how you feel about branching out to other people outside of the Texas theater educator world, because that's super niche, right? All right. Well, enjoy. Hope everybody had a good July 4th. Enough of me blabbing. I'm blabbing about blabbing. Goodbye.
Yeah. So I was a big fan of Elvis Presley when I was a little kid, and my mom had few Elvis records that when I was young, I would wake up and, in the morning before the house got up before my mom and dad got up, and I used to go play those records. And that's kind of where I developed a love of music. And I wasn't, a singer then. I just liked Elvis music. And so that sort of, stayed with me until I was probably in junior high, and I started singing in the choir and started to get a real desire to want to perform. And I, of course, when we're young like that, you get a taste of being on stage in front of an audience, whether it's kids or adults or whatever that may be, and you feel that power. And it was something that I got early on, and I liked it quite a bit. And I sort of then went into, so I started singing as a kid, and then I started doing a lot of things. I played soccer. I was into athletics, and I used to be on the FFA in high school. And then a buddy of mine, I hadn't sung after a couple of years after being in high school, my freshman and sophomore year. And a buddy of mine knew I was in the choir when I was in junior high, and he said, "Oh, you should come and be a part of the show choir that we have. It's a lot of fun. Lots of different kinds of people are in it. It's not just choir people that are in it." So I went and auditioned, and I met Judy Childress. I don't know if you know who that is, but she was my choir teacher in high school, and she had a huge effect on me as a performer. She's the one who basically handed a microphone to me one day after school and made me sing into a microphone and a speaker. And that was a very powerful moment for me, to hear my voice like that, and to realize, oh, I actually, not only can I sing, I like the way that sounds. And that gave me a lot of confidence. At that same time, I had a good friend of mine who was a dancer, and she, I forget how it really happened, but they were going to do Guys and Dolls at Dulles High School. This was in '93. And she was in the show choir with me, and she said, "Well, you should definitely come and audition for the show." And so there was a dance audition, and there was a gentleman, his name was Michael Tapley, who was a good friend of Judy Childress. And Michael came and choreographed the show, and I went in and danced and got in the show. Of course, at that time, it's big in your head. You get this big thing, and you land a spot in the school musical. And Jennifer came up to me, who actually teaches at the local dance studio that I'm going to tell you about, where I took. She said, "You really should come and take dance lessons at the studio." And being from Texas, a young boy from Texas who's an athlete, who raises chickens and hogs, and who's also in the show choir, I did all of it. I thought, well, I might as well add one more thing. And I was really impressed with Michael Tapley.
So here's the portion where his internet, or maybe even my internet, dropped out. Thank you, Xfinity, for being so supportive of this podcast and letting the internet drop out for 30 seconds. Small world, Michael Tapley was my first high school musical director. So he tells a little bit about that, his own experience with Michael Tapley, and then the audio came back.
You learn to dance if this is what you're going to do, if this is what you like. And so I did. I started taking dance lessons when I was, I think it was my sophomore year, maybe going into my junior year. I can't remember, but I started out, I went down, and it was the studio where my sister took, my younger sister. And I told my mom and dad that's what I wanted to do. And at that time, we were middle-class family and didn't have a lot of extra money because they had 3 kids. So I went down to the studio and I spoke to the studio manager, and she said, "Well, why don't you come and take 2 or 3 lessons from me? I'm interested in having you because you're a boy, and
Yeah.
And I would like that in my studio, but why don't you come and take a couple private lessons from me, and we'll see if you like it." And they were on the house. So I did. And I loved it. And the reason I loved it is because it was so challenging. It was very, very difficult, especially being an athlete, trying to learn a different just a different art form, and something that was so, had such a that was so similar to sports, but that was so different. The discipline was so different, and that was a challenge to me. And so I kept at it, and then she, I graduated from Dulles, and I kept taking dance lessons. I kept singing, and I went to Sam Houston. I got a scholarship to go there. And during that time, I had another friend at Sam Houston who was also a dancer, and she said, "You really should audition for the Galveston Island Outdoor Musicals," which was this big thing back in the 90s. And so I did. It was after my freshman year at Sam Houston, and then I went down that summer. I got a spot, and they did 3 musicals. They did Brigadoon, King and I, and West Side Story. And that was my first professional gig, I guess you could say. It was $180 a week.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I can't even believe they're paying me to do this, and I knew that summer that this is what I was doing, and this is what I was supposed to do for my career. I was going to be in live entertainment. And I finished my degree at Sam Houston. I did take a semester off because every summer between each school year, I would go work somewhere. I always made sure every single summer that I had a job in the professional theater industry. And that was important to me because I, for some reason, knew that I needed to start networking when I was, before I got out of school, so that I could hit the ground running. And I learned a lot. I learned a whole lot doing those summer stocks. That was really where I would say, I learned a lot about my talent and what I was capable of doing and honing that at school, but really learning, there's a whole other part of this, which is the business side of it. And that is the only way to really learn about that is to go do it somewhere. And so my senior year, there was a program called the Broadway Theater Project that was helmed by Anne Reinking, which was a student of Bob Fosse's and a dancer of Bob Fosse's, and it was supported by a lot of her friends, Gwen Verdon, who was also Bob's ex-wife, and wife, I guess they never divorced, but and they, at that school, happened every summer, they would invite all these celebrity teachers to come down and teach, Gregory Hines and Roy Scheider and Gwen Verdon and Anne Reinking. It was just a fantastic place to go, one, to go meet people in the industry, but two, to go train with other people. So I auditioned for that, and I got in, and there was a $3,000 fee to go take there, which was money that I didn't have at all. And so I went in on audition, and they said, we'd like to accept you. We want you to come to this. Can you, there's a $100 audition fee, which I guess covered the cost of, them traveling around. And I said, I'm a broke college student. I have no money. I'm asking for money from my aunt to just pay gas to get down here. So anyway, they said, don't worry about it. And they gave me a scholarship to go. And I met Anne, and I was one of the older folks to take the program when I was down there. And when the program was up, after the end of the 3 weeks, I approached her and said, I'm coming to New York. If you're ever teaching, I'm moving to New York. If you're ever teaching in the school, or if you have an audition, I'd love to come in for you, because I've enjoyed my time here and I enjoy, what you offer. And she said, that's great. I look forward to seeing you there, and please come take class if I'm ever teaching, or if you ever see. At that time, Fosse had just opened on Broadway. So I moved up there. I finished school. I moved up there in August of 1999, and I was very lucky. But after being there for, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, I was living in Queens with some friends. Didn't have a job yet. I had about $3,000 to my name, and that went quickly, as you know,
Yeah.
in New York City. And I got a phone call from Stuart Howard, who was the casting director for Fosse on Broadway. And they said, we'd like you to, we have a call for Fosse that's coming up in a couple of weeks. We'd like you to come in. And is there any way you can get to New York? I suppose, and Gwen probably sent my information to them, and they thought that I was still in Texas. And they said, "Oh, you're already here." And it was an emergency spot to fill. And they said, "You're already here." And they said, "You know what? Let us get back to you. It's very possible we could bring you into the theater and have you sing for the musical director." And I think what they were doing was basically saying, if he can't sing, then we're not going to go down this path. And I was actually on my way to the Salvation Army to go get a couch because I needed a cheap couch for my apartment. And I was walking by the theater nonetheless as they called me, and I said, "Look, I can be at the theater today if you need me to be there." And so they called me back. They said, "Yes, bring your book, come down to the theater, and you can sing for the musical director." So I walk into the theater, the Broadhurst Theater, and I meet the musical director at the stage door, and he walks me through the house. On the other side of the house is a piano sitting kind of in the little vomitorium, and I sang for him. And that was it. I sang 2 songs and I walked out of the theater, and he said, "You'll be hearing from us." Because Anne, of course, and Gwen they had already vouched for me as a dancer and as a performer. And the next day I got a phone call from casting, and they hired me.
Wow.
And I was 23. It changed my life instantly, obviously. To move to that city and get a job on Broadway, it was it was certainly luck, but I suppose there was a lot of preparation and timing that were involved, and that started a whole other journey, for me, of course. But that's kind of how I got my start.
What do you remember what songs you sang?
Yes. So yes, the first song, he said, "Why don't you sing anything from your book?" And I thought, okay, well, this is something I know really well, and I'm a tenor, and it shows off my voice. And I sang "On the Street Where You Live,"
Okay.
which was the wrong song to sing for Fosse on Broadway, which was loaded with standard classic musical theater, legit stuff and rock and roll, really.
Yeah.
So I said, Patrick Brady was a musical director, and he said, "What are you going to sing?" And I said, "On the Street Where You Live." And he sort of looked at me like, "All right, come on, let's go." And he sat down at the piano and he started playing, and I sang, and he was like, "That's great." He said, "Do you have anything else? What else do you have in your book?" And I had a few other things. And at that time, the life, which was a different story, but had a little more kind of rock and roll and R&B jazz. And so I sang "Use What You Got," which was at that time, which was not a song that was sung a lot. It was fairly new. Now it was used. It was much like "All I Need Is the Girl," which is something you just don't sing when you go into an audition, really, because it's sung all the time unless people request it. And I used that song a fair amount. I used that song for when I did Chicago. I got that gig with that song, and I also used that for Hairspray.
Okay. So speaking of Hairspray, it seems to be kind of one of your calling cards, because it looks like you've done a lot with that show after the fact. After doing it on Broadway, you came to Sam Houston and did it. You did it on a boat, the Royal Caribbean, if right, correct?
Ship.
Yeah. So is there a reason that that's become kind of your show, or is it just coincidence?
Yeah,
or
yes, it's a great question. I've done it a lot. And it was the first, so my sort of journey with that show, I did a workshop for Jerry Mitchell. This was in 2002. It was just after 9/11. It was called "Never Gonna Dance," which ended up going to Broadway and flopped. And it was during that workshop that he asked me if I was interested in doing Hairspray. And at that time, Hairspray was just a workshop, and they were going to do the show, rehearse the show, and take it out of town to Seattle, and then bring it back to New York. And he asked me if I would be his dance captain for the show. Actually, he asked me, would you be interested in doing the show? He said, I'll put you in the show, or you can be my dance captain. And if you're going to be the dance captain, then you need to swing the show so that you can sort of act as my eyes after, the show is up and running. So I swung the show. I decided I would take the job as a swing and as the dance captain so that I could work more with Jerry. And it was really a seed that I wanted to plant so that there was longevity to it. And it ended up paying dividends. And it really became an annuity of mine, because I've been a part of Hairspray for 19 years.
Yeah.
In many different facets. From the Broadway version, I worked on that, and then went into the show for a short time after I left, and then came back to it. And then I set the national company, and then there was a South African company, and I've done it regionally many times. And then just finished up a couple of years ago doing Hairspray Live, which, went okay. It was a better experience than I think it was in the reviews and the paper. And now, of course, Royal Caribbean. I think I've stayed as closely as I have with it because I was a part of the creation of it.
Yeah.
And I didn't write the music or create the choreography per se, and I wasn't the director, but being a part of that process was so valuable to me. And, I watched music get rewritten, and I watched lines from the show get rewritten. And even to this day, I'll hear somebody say a line, and I'll, give them a story of, this is what that line used to be. And they decided to cut that because there wasn't a laugh here, or because it was too serious. And, so I love being a part of that process, and I love sharing that with people, that knowledge of people, because it has become such a staple in the musical theater world, and
it's very relevant now too.
And it's very relevant now. It was very relevant then. It will continue to be relevant. I think because it is something that, one, it's a great show. It's fun to watch, but two, there's so much meaning behind it, and it's a political piece, obviously, right now. And if Jerry, he used to always say, if you can, he would always say, you can change the world if you change your mind. And that's our responsibility with this show. If you can teach and educate your audience while entertaining them at the same time, then we've done our jobs as artists. That's what I try and do with it.
Is there something in that you had to change, that you had a tough time changing in the Hairspray Live version? Does that make sense?
In regards to the material itself?
Yeah, in regards to the material, because it became, now it became for lack of better words, a TV show, an on-screen show, and it was kind of a traditional or staple that was in the stage version that you ended up having to kind of adjust or change because it's now, well, you're doing it for a camera.
Yeah. I think, I mean, obviously these live versions, of these shows, they haven't really worked.
Yeah.
I don't know that anybody really knows why. I mean, I think there are ways for them to work, but it just hasn't really caught on. And I think we've seen the end of them, really. But one thing is, as incredible as it is, the one thing with Hairspray is that Hairspray is about Tracy. Hairspray is about her story, and Seaweed and her journey with him and with Motormouth, and how she learns to help people, and how she learns to change people's minds, to make her world a better place. Um, and so I think with these live versions, when you have the celebrities, it becomes more about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have the sort of the major factor on it is no longer about the story,
Right.
and it's no longer about the character. It's about the sort of wow factor of doing something live, which is 100% live, doing it with the celebrity types, which is fantastic. It's
Right.
awesome to hear Kristen Chenoweth sing this music, or to hear Jennifer Hudson sing "I Know Where I've Been." It's incredible,
Right.
but I think it does take away from the material itself, and it just becomes a kind of a fad,
A pop
really.
show.
Yeah.
So I want to switch things up off of Hairspray a little bit. I had mentioned to you to mention inspirations, and you kind of already did by mentioning Judy Childress. And as a Dulles, somebody that spent 7 years there as an educator, I heard her name constantly because of the show choir, because it was this kind of famous, almost had a life of its own show. And even when you were there, I know Angela Hayes was there for part of that time, part of the time that you were, or part of the time that you were, I guess towards the end of your time there,
Yeah,
right?
she was, I want to say she was I don't know if she was a teacher's assistant when I was there, but she had just gotten done with school.
Right. Well,
So
she created the spectacle of the doll show. And so for a while, for almost a decade, they had both of those running hand in hand, and a pretty decent theater department. Brad Cummins was there, I know, at part of that time.
The whole arts program while I was there, I mean, I didn't know this at that time, but looking back, the teachers we had were, and the department they had was incredible. I mean, the talent that was coming out of the even the band, and it was they were turning out some good artists.
Yeah. So, but Judy, would you say Judy was kind of your main inspiration, at least to kind of break you through that entertainment world?
Yeah, she was really special. She was so passionate, and that was so infectious. And she also she just thought differently. I mean, she was always she was always on. She was such a huge personality.
Yeah.
And that was infectious. And she had just wonderful confidence in herself and her abilities. First of all, she was a great artist herself. She was an incredible pianist, a great teacher, she was just so inspiring to people. And that's how she taught. She could teach you music. She could teach you how to sight read. She could teach you all of the stuff, the technique. But more than anything, she was such a great leader for young minds who were nervous about doing, this sort of art form. And so she nurtured that so well, and she made you feel like you could conquer the world doing what you were doing. And I know that's so cliche to say, but her passion, when she saw something in you, she went right after it.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think I actually do as well. When I see somebody who's got something special, and maybe if that talent isn't honed, or if that their technique isn't there yet, if that fire is in them, I try and go get it. And that's something that, she would look at you in the eye and just she would be inspired herself when she saw something like that in someone, and it was infectious. And she would always tell us to be conscious of something that was happening, something that was if you were a singer and you sang, she would say, no, you need to recognize this.
Hmm.
This is really important that you're aware of what's happening right now. And sometimes, students would get really not offended, but they would be standoffish because of how aggressive she was and how much she wanted you to realize there was something in you
Right.
that you could tap into if you wanted to. And if you didn't, she understood that too.
Are there people from your time in high school? Are there people now that have kind of gone on a similar path as you that have been successful entertainers and in the industry, so to speak?
From high school?
Yeah. That you still keep in touch with, maybe even.
Right. I'm sure there have been.
Have you made it to a reunion?
I have made it. I went actually this last year. We
Okay.
did a little class reunion in Texas,
Yeah.
or of course in Texas, and at the what's the mall over there at
First Colony?
69 and Highway 6?
Yeah, First Colony Mall.
Yeah, we did a little sort of quick high school reunion. That's the first reunion I've
Well, like in the food court or something? Where?
It was a restaurant over there. I forget
Okay.
what it was.
Okay.
And of course, my sister, she lives out there. So
Yeah.
I went and I thought, well, I can go see her and go see my niece, and then I'll also go see everybody. And it was interesting to see everybody. It certainly was. But I think, there's one guy that his name was Kirk Jackson, who was an actor. He was also in the Varsity Singers. He was a year ahead of me. He's been doing a lot with, what is that? Gosh, I forget what the program is called.
Yeah.
It's they do rescue, like a lot of when Katrina
Okay.
happened, like they go and help people.
FEMA? You talking about FEMA?
Not FEMA,
Or-
no,
okay.
it's anyway.
The Cajun Army?
What's that?
The Cajun
Yeah,
Army?
exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't know anybody who, I can't think of any. This is horrible.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody offhand
That's
who's.
all right. I put you on the spot for that.
Yeah.
So and I was going to say there are a couple things that you and I have in common. One is we both played soccer. And so I have a question about that. The other thing is the Galveston summer musicals. So that was also my first professional quote unquote gig as well, but it was as a carpenter. And I remember working in that, do you remember the Pepsi can? That was the scene shop. That was their
Yes,
scene
of
shop.
course.
It was a half painted Pepsi can.
Yeah, I remember driving down there one year. I don't know that it was like that when I was there.
Okay, so
but
it got painted
I remember
afterwards.
driving down there one year going, oh my gosh, look at
Yeah. So
going down there.
It's incredible. But yeah, I remember getting paid. I think I got paid $100 for the summer, and same with you.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, man, this is, I'm just like Scrooge McDuck, just rolling in the cash right now. Just
money.
So the soccer thing, I was not on the pitch, as you would say, as much as I should have been because I was a goalie. So I didn't have probably the foot skills that you had. I could go side to side, but not front to back. But do you think that some, yeah, right, just stretch out. Do you think that some of that the athleticism or that footwork translated to maybe your success as a dancer and then ultimately as a choreographer?
Yes, absolutely, in two ways. And in one way, I think it actually hurt me being an athlete, but it's not that bad. Coordination is something I've always considered myself fairly coordinated, and I think that's one reason that I actually fell in love with dancing so much, is because it made me tap back into something, to have to learn to be coordinated, because it's such a different mindset, dancing, compared to being an athlete. Being an athlete, you sort of, I guess there are skills that you learn, but being an athlete, a lot of athletes are natural athletes. You just go because you're coached that way. And dancing, you have to start at square one when you go into a dance studio and you stand at a bar, and you stand in first position and you bend your legs. That's how. every dancer starts a dance class, whether you're 5 years old or you're 35 years old, you start a dance class the same way.
Yeah.
And so I think just the coordination aspect as an athlete helped me as a dancer, but have to relearn, in that art form in a different way. I think also as a choreographer, I think I approach the room more as a coach
Right.
than I do as a choreographer, maybe a stereotype of a choreographer would. I think I do that as a director as well. I think I do that as an educator. Because we've also, obviously, if you were an athlete, I'm sure you've had coaches who were inspiring to you, and the way their methods of getting something out of you were, I had that. And I think that's one way those two translate.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that hurt me being an athlete, then becoming a dancer, was my lack of flexibility.
Yeah.
When you're an athlete, your muscles do different things. You need them to do different things, and I was less flexible than I wanted to be later, even though I was 16, 17 when I started dancing. I didn't have the flexibility that I could have had when I was a younger kid, when your muscles and your
Right.
joints are still, malleable and able to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
What is something from your time on Broadway and things like that? Have you ever approached a situation and you were intimidated by who you were about to meet or work with?
Oh,
because you've worked with some big names, and eventually, I guess you kind of get sort of a callous over you about, okay, I'm just walking in, I'm just the same as this other person, and
yeah.
They might have more credits to their name or bigger credits to their name, maybe not more, but and eventually you just look at them as people. But has there ever been that one person that you're like, oh man, this is actually, I'm a little nervous about this one?
Right. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, there have been a lot of them. Even like working on Hairspray Live more recently, Martin Short.
Yeah.
I worked really closely with him because he came in, he was doing something else when we were shooting it or when we were rehearsing it. And so oftentimes I was Martin's stand-in in rehearsals.
Yeah.
One, because I knew it, and Harvey needed somebody to rehearse with, and so did the directors and Jerry. And so when Martin, also referred to as Marty, when Marty would come in, I would have to teach him, what he may have missed,
Mm-hmm.
whether that was in the camera blocking or whether that was in the Timeless to Me, the number that they performed. So, even though I knew Hairspray as well as I did, and I worked with a lot of famous people, it's Martin Short.
Yeah.
Martin's a big personality.
Yeah.
And I think I was slightly intimidated, but also, Martin gets in the room and he knows Harvey very well. And those two get to going, and the banter and they're like topping each other. And I'm, this guy in the corner going, okay, let's do this next, let's do this next step. Let's do the next 8 count. But I think it's, is it intimidating? It's intimidating, but it's also pretty wonderful to be in a room like that with somebody watching somebody who's as talented as they are. I think, John Lithgow is somebody, I did Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with him.
Yeah. That's who my wife was so excited to meet, by the way. And then she saw him in Dexter. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, let me tell you something. John is somebody that there are times where I approach things in life and I go, what would John do?
Yeah.
What would John say? Because first of all, we know how gifted he is as an actor. And his resume is just, it speaks for itself. It's off the charts, and the range and the amount of years he's been so successful. But he's one of the kindest person kindest people that I've ever met. And he's super intelligent, Harvard grad. He's a great listener, whether in conversation with him or on the stage. He's just got a great outlook on life, and it seems like he's always had that, because that's what kind of person he is.
Right.
And I think that's actually why he's so successful is he is just his approach to things. Now, I'm sure he has his ways, as we all have, trying to figure things out and trying to figure the world out. But he was somebody working with him, being in the room with him, or even being, out socially with him, that I highly respect, just because of his very level-headedness and his calm approach to things. And John, he was one of the people that he could laugh at himself,
right.
Whether he, stumbled across the stage or, there was a day that happened, something that happened in rehearsal one day, which I won't elaborate on, but that was just, he was really embarrassing for him.
Yeah.
And, just the way he got out of it was just he was a class act. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's certainly intimidating, but I think once you can kind of get over that hurdle of being around celebrities, you realize that it's a great career I've chosen.
Yeah, it's also a learning experience. I mean, getting to know these people. So I do have a small nugget. You may not even know this, but I've, as most people that listen to this podcast know, I do very little research for the people that I talk to. But for you, I did. I pulled up a couple things. But one thing I noticed was when you staged or directed Hairspray at SAM, back at SAM.
Yeah.
Your bassist was named Steve Martin, and and you did Hairspray Live with Martin Short. So I just thought that was kind of funny because obviously the two of them have a show and quite the history, but I didn't know, you probably didn't even know who your orchestra or your players were necessarily. You probably know your director, your conductor, but
not by, you mean at Sam Houston?
Yeah, it's Sam, just at Sam. Yeah.
Yeah. You see the guys there. They're in the pit. Those are the guys in the pit, right?
Yeah. They do their own thing. They're their own special kind of breed anyway. But I was like, that's kind of funny. I wonder if he even knows that his bass player was named Steve Martin. So
they were a great orchestra though.
Yeah. Sam pulls out some pretty amazing stuff. So of your Broadway credits, which one are you, and you don't necessarily have to say which one you think was the best show. I don't care about that, but which one are you most proud of?
Most proud of, I guess I would have to say I'm most proud of Fosse, because that was the thing that
started you off, kind of thing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Well, and it was my at that point, up until then, that was I realized this is what I've been working for, and it is going to pay off,
right.
And I think it's going to be okay,
right.
And being able to call my parents and my dad and tell them, Dad, I got a job, on Broadway, and they're going to pay me this much, which is, and that's the other thing, a young kid who gets thrown a salary like that, which isn't incredible, but it's more money than I ever thought I would make in my life in this industry, and that's a great feeling. But at the same token, Hairspray is also something that I'm super proud of, because of the amount of work I put into it and the amount of people that I hope I've been able to affect and teach, and I've, every time I do it, I learn something new about the show, or I learned how to, apply something differently or inspire someone, or it's a tricky piece to do, especially, in the coming years, it's going to be even trickier. But it's our responsibility. This is what we do, and this is how we say it. And so that's our job.
Is there, and I won't keep you much longer than this, but is there a role that you had to swing into that you were more kind of nervous about doing? I know I've got, again, when I interviewed Larry Smigleski, and I won't tell the story because I think it was off the record, but he was talking about something from Kiss Me Kate, a swing incident that happened with, an unexpected swing incident, and I won't name the character or anything like that, but the person had to go in, the swing had to go in, and was had not planned on swinging for that role, and so was not fully prepared because it wasn't really part of their plan, if you would say, their contract. Is there an incident like that where you you were like so ready to go in as X, Y, and Z character, and then they said, well, we need you for this character over here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a ton of that stuff.
How do you get through that? That just, sorry to cut you off. It amazes me that you can just literally dance right onto the stage and play the part.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we all, in those sort of instances, we know more than we give ourselves credit for, whether you're an understudy or whether you're a swing or, whether that's in the theater or something else in life, whether you're a paramedic and you have to do something else. That's not, I think we know more, and a lot of times in those circumstances, instinct, you have to just trust your instinct because what's going to happen is just going to happen.
Right.
But I think there are two things that kind of spring to mind. One is actually myself, and one is someone else. For myself, there was Billy Elliot. It happened during Billy Elliot. So I was the dance captain for Billy Elliot. Ended up becoming the resident choreographer for it. After I left the show, I stopped performing in the show and then became the resident. When the resident choreographer, just to tell you quickly about that, what they do is essentially, because the show is so large, and there are so many people, and there was a massive company of children in the show, and there was a big company of dancers, and then there's all the actors. We had a couple dance captains and a couple resident choreographers just to keep the thing going. And when I think I was the resident by then, but there was a role in the show called Mr. Braithwaite. And for those who don't know the live show, in the movie, in the live show, he's the piano player. And he sort of sits over there in the corner, and he's has a bit of a drinking problem. And he's the comic relief. In the scene. Anyway, so I didn't understudy the role, but I taught the role a few times. So I knew all the choreography, I knew the blocking, I knew the lines, everything, just from being around it, being exposed. So one day, Billy Elliot, there were always a lot of injuries in Billy Elliot. One reason because there was a rake stage, and two, it was just very aggressive show to do, very choreographically. It was a very hard show to do, lots of stunts and choreography. I'm in between shows one day, and I'm at I think I was at Best Buy. I think maybe I was looking at music or something. I don't know. I was buying something which was just down the street from the Imperial Theater. And I get a phone call, and it's the stage manager, Bonnie Becker. And she says, and I'm thinking, oh, she's going to tell me who's out, because I have to cut the show and I have to tell people what they're doing.
Right.
And he says, hey, Greg, so we have a bit of an issue here. And I said, okay, well, who's out? And she said, well, so-and-so's out and so-and-so's out. And this person's out. And those three people that she said that were out was the man who played Mr. Braithwaite every night, was his first cover, and the second cover.
So you know where this was going.
Were down with
yeah.
And I thought, and I said, okay. And as a choreographer, you're thinking one of two things. Are we cutting the role, or who are we going to get to do it? And so, you start thinking, okay, who can we call who's sitting on their couch right now, who maybe had done it somewhere, who can come in? And she says, well, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Or you can do it. and I start thinking, okay, give me 5 minutes. Let me call my agent.
Yeah.
Give me 5 minutes and I'll call you back.
Yeah.
Because she knew, like I don't cover it. And if I were to go on that night, there's a lot of things that happen contractually,
Right.
which was great because I was owed a lot of retro pay. Anyway, I call her back and I say, I'll do it. Because that was really the easiest way to do it.
Right.
To not have, there are a lot of children in the show and you don't want to affect them in a way that's going to throw their show. And they've seen me maybe do it in rehearsals in some aspect,
Right.
So I did it. So I went on and it really, there's a scene in the show where he comes on for the first time and he comes barreling through the doors, just, sort of bumbling drunk, stumbles down the stairs and you're waiting for your cue in front of an 1,800 seat theater, and you burst through the doors like, it was just like you're watching, the Carol Burnett show, it's Tim Conway coming through, and that was sort of my approach to it, really.
Right.
And I didn't know what was going to happen, Blake. I knew the lines, I knew the steps, I knew what I was supposed to do, but I didn't know really what was going to happen. And you just go, and it went great.
Did you
great?
go?
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
What I was going to say, the other thing that happened that I was so proud of when I saw it was that happened to one of the ballet girls, which, if you know the show and the story, there were also swings for the ballet girls.
Yeah.
And there was one of the girls, there's an older swing and a middle swing and a baby swing. And the middle swing knew 4 different tracks that she could cover. And there was another track that we needed her to go on for. Track meaning one of the roles in the show, one of the ballet girls. And she said, we asked her if she would want to do it. And she said, yeah, I think I can do it. And she was really excited to do it, but she was really scared. And we, kept saying she's going to be great, and we're right here. And if you need to leave the stage and come off, you can do that, or you can just go out there and have fun, just like you do in rehearsals. And she barrels onto the stage and dances onto the stage, and there she goes. And we all waited in the wing. It was like a big family,
Yeah.
There were 20 or 30 crew members and stage managers and actors, and we were, rooting for her. And she just did so fantastic, watching this little 8-year-old girl, pull this out.
Right.
But that's, it's just going back to your question is have you, in a situation like that where you're just thrown on, you just sort of let instinct, take over.
Because that role is a comedic role, your role, not the 8-year-old, not the dancer, because that role was comedic, were you at any point looking at your peers and thinking, are they going to laugh at me now? Not in a bad way, or where they are expecting, oh my gosh, here comes Greg, like he's about to do this. And I know they're all professionals and they've all got to keep their character and all that stuff, but we're also human.
Yeah, of course.
So,
yeah, you see each other on. You're of course you're in the scene, as they say.
Yeah.
Being honest to the material,
Yeah.
and all of that. That's what you're supposed to do. But of course, the as I was saying, I come stumbling in and hit the ground, and I rattle off a little monologue about Diaghilev and the Ballet Russe and how ballet became what it is. And Trent Kowalik, who was one of the original Billies, who ended up winning a Tony Award for the role, he was on that night. Trent is a really smart little actor, and I come out and he's facing up stage, and you could just see in his eyes, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening right now.
Yeah.
Like, and he had a little smirk to him. And
that's funny.
And even Hayden, who played the teacher, she, it was something that was abnormal. This was not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And to see me in this, really ratty wig and a hat and, a beard or mustache or whatever, it was funny. It was different.
That sounds fun.
Stephen Daldry came that night. He saw the show too, as well, the director. It was great to have him there.
So I'm going to wrap up with this. I do have a lot of students that listen to this podcast, a lot of theater kids around the state, maybe even further. I don't know. I'd like to think that I have students from all over the world that listen to this, and it's translated in hundreds of languages, but that's not the case. But do you have sort of a piece of inspiration, a word of advice that you could give these kids? And I know your words earlier about moving to New York, and you it was luck, but also hard work that got you the Fosse gig. That you very much, without saying it, talked about networking. Making sure you're pretty much kind to your neighbor and not burning bridges. Is there some piece of advice that you could give these kids that right now, especially in the time we're in, they're thinking, second guessing their career choice to go into the entertainment industry and things like that, knowing full well it will come back. It may not be tomorrow, but it will. Something that you could say to those people, to even teachers out there that might be down on themselves right now in this kind of odd time.
Yeah, I think so. Of course, two things I have especially for students and the younger generation coming up and wanting to go into show business. First and foremost, be a nice person. Just be a nice person. Get over yourself and be a nice person. That will take you a long, long way. It will keep you learning. It will keep you realizing that you have a lot to learn. It will keep you listening to people. To be a good actor, you need to be sympathetic to people and to characters, and empathetic, but be a nice person. It will just pay dividends in the end. And the other thing is to do a lot of things. I know it's a silly piece of advice, but don't just be a dancer, and don't just be an actor, or a singer. Be a horseback rider, and be a surfer. And if you want to go to law school, go to law school. You can still be an actor and have a law degree. But do a lot of different things, because that's how I think that really affects you as an artist. Whether you're a painter, or whether you're an actor, or a singer, these roles that you play, whether they're in live theater or on camera, you rarely play a role on stage that is an actor on stage or a dancer on stage. You play farmers, and you play businessmen and women, and you play presidents, and you play you need to know who those people are. So do everything that you can get your hands on. Teach yourself different crafts. I think it's one thing that's really helped me in this business. But there may be one day, and there was for me, even after 20 years in professional theater, where I just thought, I need to do something else now. I need to do it in a different way. I'm not a dancer anymore. I don't want to perform anymore. I want to create it. And then I'm in casting. You will do other things in your life. And so it's great that you want to be, an artist and a performer, but there will come a time where that will change. And so you need to be good at other things.
Right.
And there are there are so many different paths in showbiz, whether you are an educator, or whether you're an agent, or whether you're into entertainment law,
Yeah.
Or a stage manager, or a conductor, or a composer. I mean, there's so many different facets, and the way to do that is to do a lot of things.
Minor wisdom.